Bad Nauheim, Germany. September 13th. 1959. Saturday evening. 8:15 p.m. The small German town sits quiet in the autumn twilight, its cobblestone streets reflecting the soft glow of streetlights that have witnessed centuries of European history. This is not Memphis, not Hollywood, not any of the places where Elvis Presley's name appears in blazing neon. This is a modest spa town where American military families live temporary lives, waiting for orders that will take them to the next assignment, the next country, the next chapter of their nomadic existence. Tonight, Bad Nauheim will witness the beginning of one of the most famous and controversial love stories in entertainment history. In a modest two-story house on Go the Strasse, 14-year-old Priscilla Beaulieu stands in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the collar of her best dress. Navy blue with small white polka dots, a dress her mother Anne bought her for special occasions. Tonight feels special, though Priscilla isn't quite sure why. Her friend Cary Grant has invited her to a party, something about meeting some American soldiers, maybe dancing to some records, nothing too exciting for a Saturday night in a sleepy German town. But Priscilla is nervous in a way that has nothing to do with the party. At 14, she is caught between childhood and something else, something she doesn't have words for yet. She has the face of a child, but the awareness of someone older, the kind of premature sophistication that comes from growing up in military families, from moving constantly, from learning to adapt to new places and new people before she's had time to understand who she is herself. Her stepfather, Colonel Paul Beaulieu, sits downstairs in his favorite chair reading Stars and Stripes, the military newspaper that keeps him connected to the larger world beyond this German town. At 42, Paul Beaulieu is a career Air Force officer who has dedicated his life to service, duty, and the protection of his family. He is a man who believes in rules, in structure, in the clear boundaries that separate right from wrong, appropriate from inappropriate, safe from dangerous. Paul has raised Priscilla since she was 4 years old, when he married her mother Anne. To him, Priscilla is not his stepdaughter, she is his daughter, the little girl he has watched grow up, protected from the world's dangers, guided through the confusion of adolescence, with the steady hand of a father who loves her more than his own life. Priscilla, Paul calls up the stairs, his voice carrying the authority of a man used to being obeyed. "What time will you be home?" 10:30, Dad. Priscilla calls back, checking her lipstick one more time. Light pink, barely there, the kind of makeup that suggests innocence rather than sophistication. "And you're going with Curry?" "Yes, Dad. Just to her friend's house. Nothing exciting." Paul nods to himself, returns to his newspaper. Priscilla is a good girl, responsible, well-behaved. She has never given him reason to worry. Tonight, like most nights, she will be home by 10:30, will kiss him goodnight, will go to her room and read or listen to music until she falls asleep. The routine of a normal teenage girl in a normal military family. Paul has no way of knowing that in 3 hours his daughter will meet the most famous man in the world. He has no way of knowing that this ordinary Saturday night will change everything. Across town, in a rented house on Go Strasse that serves as temporary headquarters for the most unexpected soldier in the United States Army, Elvis Presley sits at a piano, playing quietly so he won't disturb the neighbors. At 24, Elvis is no longer the young rebel who shocked America with his hip movements and dangerous smile. Military service has changed him, matured him, given him a sense of responsibility he never had as a teenager in Memphis. But being in Germany, far from the screaming crowds and flashing cameras, has also given Elvis something else: loneliness. The kind of deep, persistent loneliness that comes from being famous among strangers, from being Elvis Presley everywhere except in his own heart. His army service is scheduled to end in less than 6 months. Soon he will return to America, to the career that made him the most famous performer on the planet, to the movies and recordings and concerts that have made him rich beyond imagination. But tonight, in this quiet German house, Elvis is just another homesick American soldier, playing sad songs on a piano and wondering if fame is worth the price he has paid for it. Red West, his friend and bodyguard, sits across the room, reading a letter from home. Red has been with Elvis since high school, has watched him transform from a shy teenager into a global phenomenon, has seen the cost of that transformation in ways that fans never will. "You want to go out tonight, EP?" Red asks, using the nickname that only Elvis's closest friends are allowed to use. There's supposed to be a party at Curry Grant's place. Some of the guys from the base will be there. Elvis stops playing, considers the suggestion. He has been to parties like this before, Maya's awkward gatherings, where young military families try to create some version of American normalcy in foreign settings. Usually, Elvis ends up signing autographs and posing for pictures, being Elvis Presley rather than being himself. "I don't know, Red. I'm not really in the mood for being owned tonight. Maybe it'll be different this time." Curry says, "It's just a small group, mostly teenagers. Maybe they won't even know who you are." Elvis laughs, but there's no humor in it. "Red, my face has been on magazine covers in every country in Europe. These kids know who I am." But even as he says it, Elvis feels the familiar pull of loneliness that makes him want to be around people, any people, even if it means performing the role of Elvis Presley for strangers who will never see him as anything else. The loneliness has been his constant companion since becoming famous. The isolation that comes with being instantly recognizable, the burden of always being on, always being what people expect Elvis Presley to be. In Germany, far from the American press and the screaming fans, Elvis had hoped to find some version of normal life. But even here, even in army uniform, even trying to be just another soldier, he remains Elvis Presley, trapped inside his own fame like a man in a glass cage. "All right," he says finally. "Let's go. But just for an hour. And if it gets crazy, we leave." Neither Elvis nor Red has any way of knowing that this party, this ordinary Saturday night gathering of American teenagers in a small German town, will introduce Elvis to the person who will become the center of his world for the next 18 years. Neither of them understands that sometimes the most important moments in our lives come disguised as ordinary Saturday nights. The party is exactly what Elvis expected. A living room full of young people trying too hard to have fun, portable record player spinning the latest American hits, awkward conversations between boys and girls who don't quite know how to talk to each other yet. The house belongs to Curry Grant, whose father is stationed at the nearby Air Force base, and who has turned her family's modest living room into a teenage social center for the small American community in Bad Nauheim. When Elvis walks through the door, the effect is immediate and predictable. Conversations stop, records continue playing, but nobody is listening anymore. Every person in the room turns to stare at the most famous face in the world, the face they have seen in movies and magazines and on television, now standing in their friend's living room like something from a dream. "Oh my God," someone whispers. "That's really him." Elvis forces a smile, the practiced smile of a performer who has learned to be gracious, even when he wants to disappear. "Hi everyone, thanks for having me." For the next hour, Elvis does what he always does at gatherings like this. He signs autographs, poses for pictures, answers the same questions he has answered 1,000 times before. He is polite, charming, professional. He is Elvis Presley, the product, the brand, the entertainment commodity that generates millions of dollars in revenue. But he is not himself. He is never himself at parties like this. Then, at 9:30, when Elvis is considering making his excuses and leaving early, she walks into the room. Priscilla Beaulieu enters the party the way 14-year-old girls enter parties, quietly, nervously, looking around for familiar faces, hoping she doesn't seem as out of place as she feels. She is wearing her navy blue dress with white polka dots, her hair styled in the conservative fashion that military fathers prefer, her makeup so subtle it might not be there at all. She is, Elvis thinks immediately, the most beautiful girl he has ever seen. Not beautiful in the Hollywood way, not beautiful in the way of the actresses and models who throw themselves at him wherever he goes. Beautiful in a way that has nothing to do with sophistication or experience, or knowing how to use beauty as a weapon. Beautiful in the way that speaks to something deeper than physical attraction, something that has to do with innocence and possibility, and the kind of purity that Elvis thought no longer existed in the world he inhabits. Priscilla scans the room, looking for Curry, not yet noticing the unusually quiet atmosphere or the way everyone seems to be staring in the same direction. When she finally sees what they are all looking at, when she realizes that Elvis Presley is standing 10 feet away from her, her reaction is different from everyone else's. She doesn't scream. She doesn't rush forward for an autograph. She doesn't swoon or giggle or do any of the things that teenage girls usually do when they encounter their idol. She simply stops, looks at him with clear, intelligent eyes, and waits. Elvis finds himself walking toward her, drawn by something he doesn't understand, something that has nothing to do with her beauty and everything to do with the way she doesn't treat him like Elvis Presley. "Hi," he says. When he reaches her, his voice softer than it has been all evening. "I'm Elvis." "I know," she says simply. "I'm Priscilla." They look at each other for a moment that feels longer than it is, a moment when the noise of the party fades away and nothing exists except the space between them. "Would you like to sit down?" Elvis asks, gesturing toward a quiet corner where 2 chairs sit slightly apart from the crowd. "Okay," Priscilla says. They spend the next hour talking, and Elvis discovers something remarkable. Priscilla Beaulieu is not impressed by fame. She asks him about Germany, about whether he misses home, about what it's like to be so far from everything familiar. She doesn't ask for autographs or pictures. She doesn't mention his movies or his records. She talks to him as if he is a person rather than a celebrity, as if his thoughts and feelings matter more than his public image. For the first time in years, Elvis feels like himself in the presence of another person. When the party begins to wind down, Elvis realizes he doesn't want this conversation to end. "Priscilla, would you like to... could I take you home?" Priscilla hesitates, not because she doesn't want to spend more time with Elvis, but because she suddenly remembers that she is 14 years old and he is 24, that she has a curfew and parents who will want to know where she has been and who she has been with. "I should probably go with Curry," she says reluctantly. "Of course," Elvis says, understanding more than she realizes. "But maybe I could see you again." Priscilla looks at him, this famous man who seems suddenly vulnerable, suddenly young despite being 10 years older than her. "I'd like that." Elvis drives home that night in a state he hasn't experienced since he was a teenager himself. Not the excitement of performing or the satisfaction of success, but the giddy, terrifying, wonderful feeling of falling in love. The next morning, Colonel Paul Beaulieu sits at his kitchen table, reading his newspaper and drinking his coffee, enjoying the quiet routine of Sunday morning. Priscilla is still asleep upstairs. Teenagers need their rest, and Anne is in the garden, tending to the small flower bed that makes their temporary German house feel more like home. The phone rings at 9:15 a.m. Colonel Beaulieu, this is Cary Grant. I was calling to thank you for letting Priscilla come to the party last night. Of course, Cary. I hope she had a nice time. Oh, she did, sir. In fact, I was calling because, well, someone at the party wanted me to ask if Priscilla might like to go to dinner tonight, with a chaperone, of course. Paul sets down his coffee cup, his father's instincts suddenly alert. What kind of dinner, Cary? And with whom? There is a pause on the other end of the line, and Paul can hear Cary taking a breath before she answers. Well, sir, it's with Elvis Presley. The singer? He was at the party last night, and he and Priscilla talked for quite a while, and he asked if she might like to have dinner. The silence in the Beaulieu kitchen stretches for 15 seconds. Paul stares at the phone as if it has delivered news of an alien invasion. Did you say Elvis Presley? Yes, sir. He's stationed here in Germany, you know. He's in the army. Paul knows who Elvis Presley is. Every parent in America knows who Elvis Presley is. Elvis Presley is everything that parents fear their daughters will fall in love with. Rebellious, sexual, dangerous, the embodiment of everything that threatens traditional values and parental authority. Cary, how old is Elvis Presley? I think he's 24, sir. And he wants to take my 14-year-old daughter to dinner. With a chaperone, sir. He was very clear about that. Paul closes his eyes, feeling the weight of fatherly responsibility settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. His daughter, his innocent, well-behaved, sensible daughter, has somehow attracted the attention of the most famous and arguably most inappropriate man in America. Thank you for calling, Cary. I'll discuss this with Priscilla and get back to you. Paul hangs up the phone, sits back in his chair and contemplates the conversation he is about to have with his daughter. How do you tell a 14-year-old girl that she cannot see Elvis Presley? How do you explain that fame and excitement and the attention of the most desirable man in the world are not worth the risks that come with them? An hour later, when Priscilla comes downstairs for breakfast, Paul is ready. Priscilla, I got a call from Cary Grant this morning. Priscilla freezes, her hand halfway to the orange juice pitcher. She knows immediately what this is about. About the party. About Elvis Presley asking you to dinner. Priscilla sits down slowly, looking at her father's face, trying to read his mood. It would just be dinner, Dad. With a chaperone. Priscilla, do you understand who Elvis Presley is? Of course I do. He's 24 years old. He's a grown man. You're 14 years old. I know that, Dad. Do you understand what people will think? What they will say? Priscilla looks down at her hands, folded in her lap, like the hands of the child she still is. He's not what people think, Dad. He's nice. He's lonely. He talked to me like I mattered. Paul feels his heart breaking for his daughter, for her innocence, for her inability to understand that being noticed by someone famous is not the same as being loved by someone trustworthy. Priscilla, I'm sorry, but the answer is no. You may not have dinner with Elvis Presley. The tears that fill Priscilla's eyes are not the tears of a child denied a toy. They are the tears of someone who has glimpsed something wonderful and been told it is forbidden. Dad, please, just one dinner. Just to get to know him. Absolutely not. And I don't want you to see him again. Paul's voice carries the finality of military authority, the tone that ends all discussion. But as he watches his daughter's face crumble with disappointment, he feels like the villain in her story rather than the protector he is trying to be. What Paul doesn't know, what he cannot possibly understand on this Sunday morning in September 1959, is that Elvis Presley will not give up easily, that the most persistent man in show business has fallen in love with his daughter and will spend the next 8 years proving that some love stories are stronger than parental disapproval. 8 years later, on May 1st, 1967, in Las Vegas, Nevada, Colonel Paul Beaulieu will walk his daughter down the aisle of the Aladdin Hotel chapel and give her away in marriage to Elvis Presley. He will smile for the cameras and pose for the pictures and give interviews about how proud he is of his new son-in-law. But on this Sunday morning in Bad Nauheim, all Paul knows is that his 14-year-old daughter has attracted the attention of the most dangerous man in America, and his job as her father is to protect her from whatever consequences that attention might bring. Stay away from Elvis Presley, Priscilla. That's an order. The order will be ignored. The love story will continue. And 8 years of secret phone calls, carefully supervised visits, and a courtship conducted under the watchful eyes of parents and the media will prove that some connections are stronger than age differences, stronger than social disapproval, stronger even than a father's protective love. Sometimes the best love stories are the ones that begin with no, and prove that true love finds a way.